That night, when the storm hammered against my windows and my world was finally quiet, 3 trembling voices echoed outside my door at 2:12 a.m. They weren't strangers. They were the very people who had destroyed my life, now begging me to save theirs. My name is Nia Coleman, and I am 32 years old. If you met me today, you would probably see a calm woman living alone in Silver Ridge, Nevada, someone who minds her own business, keeps her boundaries firm, and never lets anyone cross those invisible lines again. But I wasn't always like this. I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, inside a small 2-bedroom house where the walls held more noise than love. My mother, Patricia, worked 2 jobs most of her life and expected me, the smart one, to become the family's problem solver. My older brother, Marcus, was always the golden child, the one who got endless second chances, and his wife Layla only added another layer to the chaos. I was the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who fixed everything. Maybe that was my first mistake. I worked hard, earned scholarships, graduated early, and eventually built a steady career as a data infrastructure analyst. The kind of job that sounds complicated enough that people assume you're rich. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. And stability in my family meant one thing. I could be used. 4 years, every phone call carried a new emergency. Mom needs a repair. Marcus' credit card is maxed out. We only need a little help this month. Layla got sick. Please send something. A little help turned into $39,800 over the years. Every dollar taken with guilt. Every dollar disguised as family support. But I didn't complain. Not until the day their lies finally broke me. Because no matter how much I gave, no matter how many problems I solved, I never realized I was walking straight into the biggest betrayal of my life. A betrayal that would push me to leave everything behind, disappear without warning, and build a new life where no one could ever touch me again. And yet, even after all of that, even after all the damage they caused, one stormy night, at 2:12 a.m., they still found me. They still came. They still begged. And I, the woman they once controlled, finally had the power to decide what happened next. Growing up, I used to believe loyalty was sacred, something you never question, something you never break. Maybe that belief came from watching my mother struggle every single day, trying to stretch her paycheck into something that resembled a life. Maybe it came from seeing my brother Marcus fail repeatedly and still be praised simply for trying. Maybe it came from being the child who had no choice but to grow up too early. But loyalty becomes a weapon when it's used against you. I learned that slowly, like watching a crack form in glass. It doesn't shatter immediately. It spreads, quietly and invisibly, until one day the whole thing collapses. The first crack appeared the year I got my first real job. I still remember the moment I held that offer letter in my hands. I was ecstatic, finally stepping into a career I had worked so hard for as a data infrastructure analyst. My salary wasn't extraordinary, but for me, it felt like a door opening into a world I had built on my own merit. I came home excited, almost breathless, ready to share the news. Mom didn't even let me finish before saying, "Good. Because we're 3 months behind on the heating bill." Marcus added a sigh, like my success was inconvenient for him. Layla smiled that tight, polite smile of hers, the one that always made me feel like a walking wallet. There was no congratulations. No, you did it. Just an expectation. Like the moment I earned something, it already belonged to them. Another crack formed when Marcus asked for $5,000 to cover his business investment. That business never existed. Then Layla needed money for medical tests. Later I discovered it was for a weekend trip with her friends. And my mother, Patricia. She always had some crisis waiting in the shadows. Appliances breaking, unpaid taxes, or mysterious debts that surfaced exactly when she learned I got a bonus. I told myself it was okay. That families help each other. But deep down, I felt the weight building, slowly tightening around me, like a rope pulling at my throat. The real turning point came 2 years later, at a family dinner. We were sitting around the table eating roasted chicken, the same recipe Mother made on special occasions. The smell should have brought comfort, but something about that night felt heavy. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. Layla kept whispering to him. Mom was too cheerful, a forced kind of cheerful. And then it came. Patricia looked at me with a shaky smile and said, "Nia, we're thinking of refinancing the old house." Marcus found a lender who agreed. "It'll help the family. But they need your signature." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "Why my signature?" "Because," Marcus muttered, "your credit score is stronger." I felt something twist inside me, something deep, something I had ignored for too long. I pushed my plate away. "I'm not signing anything." Layla's face hardened instantly. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. Mom's smile shattered. They didn't argue. They didn't shout. They simply stared in cold disappointment, like I had committed a betrayal, while they had no idea they were the ones betraying me every single day. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that they were already way ahead of me. They didn't need my permission anymore. They had already started using my identity. That night, as I walked back to my room, the cold Minnesota air felt different. Sharper, heavier, almost warning me that the life I thought I understood was about to crumble in ways I had never prepared for. And I was right. I've gone over this part of my life so many times that the memories feel like scars now, faded, but impossible to forget. Back then, I honestly believed that creating a little distance from my family, saying no more often, and focusing on my own life would somehow protect me. I didn't realize that the real damage was already happening behind my back. The betrayal didn't come as a fight. It didn't come as shouting or accusations. It came quietly, disguised as normal life, slipping closer day by day, like a shadow you don't notice until it's right behind you. It started with an envelope. One morning, a white envelope lay half-pushed under my apartment door. I almost ignored it until I saw the sender printed neatly in the corner, Northview Financial Services, Loan Review Department. A strange coldness ran through me. I hadn't applied for a loan. Not recently. Not ever. I opened the envelope slowly, half expecting it to be a marketing letter. But the moment my eyes scanned the first line, my heart began pounding so loudly I could hear it echo in the silence. They were pleased to inform me that my application for a $95,000 private medical loan was being processed, and they simply needed to verify some personal details before final approval. I stood there stunned, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. Medical loan? I wasn't sick. I hadn't applied for anything. I wasn't even close to needing medical help. And then I saw the worst line of all, the collateral information. The house listed was my late grandfather Ernest's home. The home he worked his entire life to protect. The home filled with memories of summers, stories, love. Memories no one had the right to touch. And beneath that, in clean, unemotional text. Primary applicant, Nia Coleman. Family references, Patricia Coleman, Marcus Coleman. My mother and brother had used my name. Used my identity. Used my grandfather's legacy. My fingers went numb. I actually had to sit down because the world suddenly felt tilted. For a long moment, I couldn't even breathe. That evening, without thinking twice, I drove straight to my mother's house. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw them inside through the living room window. Marcus leaning back like he owned the place, Layla scrolling on her phone, and Mom smiling as if nothing in the world was wrong. But the moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. They recognized the letter in my hand instantly. No one spoke. No one welcomed me. It was as if they were waiting for me to explode. "What is this?" I finally said. No response. Not even a flicker of guilt. I placed the letter on the coffee table, right in front of them. A $95,000 medical loan in my name. Using our grandfather's house. Using my identity. Do any of you want to explain how this happened? Layla didn't even flinch. "It's just paperwork. You're overreacting." Marcus shrugged lazily. "You weren't supposed to find out so soon." So soon. The words hit me like a punch. My mother folded her hands as if she had been wronged. "We're family, Nia. We thought you'd help. After everything we've done for you." "Done for me?" I almost laughed right there. "You forged my name," I said quietly. "You lied to a lender. You used my credit, my information, my life. And you didn't think I deserved to know." Marcus exhaled in irritation. "It's already moving through the system. Just let it go through. It won't affect you." It won't affect me. My entire identity was being used without my permission. My family home was being pledged without my knowledge. And they wanted me to let it go. Something inside me cracked wide open at that moment. Not gently but sharply, like glass under pressure. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't beg them to understand. I simply walked out of that house, got into my car, and drove through the freezing Minnesota night with my hands trembling against the steering wheel. Some betrayals feel like heartbreak. This one felt like suffocation. I didn't know it then, but this was the night everything changed. The night I realized I couldn't save them anymore. The night I understood that staying meant losing myself entirely. And it was only the beginning. I drove without direction, without purpose, without even realizing how tightly I was gripping the steering wheel. The streets of St. Paul were quiet, covered in a thin layer of fresh snow that sparkled under the yellow streetlights. Every turn I took felt heavier, as if the city itself was trying to pull me back into the life I was running from. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I parked near a closed grocery store, rested my forehead against the steering wheel, and let myself breathe for the first time in hours. The cold outside didn't bother me as much as the cold I felt inside, that icy shock when you discover the people who raised you were never really protecting you. They were preparing to use you. I replayed their faces, their calmness, their entitlement. The way Marcus had said, "Just let it go through." Like my entire future was a minor inconvenience to him. It hurt, not in a loud way, not in a dramatic way. It hurt quietly, deeply, the way betrayal always hurts when it comes from those you once loved without conditions. Somewhere between midnight and the first hint of dawn, a decision settled inside me so clearly that I didn't even question it. I would leave. Not temporarily. Not as a break. Not as a punishment. I would disappear from their reach, financially, emotionally, physically. I opened my phone and started making changes immediately. Small things at first. Enabling every security lock on my bank accounts, turning on credit alerts, requesting my full credit reports, checking every document connected to my name, scanning for unusual activity. The deeper I went, the worse it got. There were inquiries I had never made. Forms I had never filled. An insurance quote under my name I had never asked for. They weren't just planning one thing. They were preparing multiple exits, all through me. My chest tightened as I scrolled through page after page of things I had never authorized. The betrayal wasn't a single act. It was a pattern. One that had been building quietly while I lived my life believing I was helping my family. By the time the sky began to lighten, my decision was final. I wouldn't confront them again. I wouldn't try to make them understand. I wouldn't argue or explain or demand anything. I was done. The next morning, I called my landlord, handed in my notice, and began packing my apartment. I only kept what I could fit in my car: clothes, important documents, my work laptop, a few sentimental things that weren't tied to my family. Everything else I left behind. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't give forwarding information. I shut down my social media, changed my phone number, and stopped answering unknown calls. I contacted my HR department privately and requested a remote transfer option, something they had offered months ago but I had never needed, until now. Within 7 days, I was gone. I crossed state lines as if I was shedding entire layers of my life. Every mile felt like a clean cut from the roots that had held me down. When I finally reached Silver Ridge, Nevada, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Silence. No expectations. No guilt. No emergencies waiting for me. No footsteps behind me. Just silence. And the unfamiliar but strangely comforting realization that I belonged only to myself now. I signed the lease for a small apartment with tall windows and a view of the mountains. The air smelled different, dry, clean, open. As I stood in the empty living room, surrounded by boxes and the echo of my own heartbeat, I made myself a promise. No one would ever use my name again. No one would ever access my life again. No one would ever break me the way they did. I thought that moving away would be the ending. I had no idea it was only the beginning, because betrayal doesn't stop moving just because you do. And eventually, it found me again. For a while, Silver Ridge felt like the safest place on earth. I would wake up to the quiet hum of the desert wind, sunlight spilling through my blinds like a promise. I made coffee in my tiny kitchen, logged in to work remotely, and tried, really tried, to rebuild myself from the inside out. The mountains in the distance always looked steady, unbothered, ancient. I envied them. I thought distance was the answer. I thought changing my number, my address, my entire routine would finally give me peace. But betrayal isn't a place. It's a shadow. And shadows follow you. It started with small things. A call from a bank I had never opened an account with, asking me to confirm a transaction. An email from a credit union thanking me for interest in their auto loan program. Notifications about inquiries appearing on my credit report, ones I had not made. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a mix-up. Maybe an error. Maybe a delay from the old loan incident. But deep down, I knew better. They weren't done with me. One night, around 11 p.m., I sat on the floor of my new apartment surrounded by papers, statements, and printouts. The more I connected the dots, the clearer it became. Marcus and Layla had found new ways to use my information. Not big loans. Not dramatic sums. Just small, sneaky attempts, like they were testing how far they could go before I noticed. I remember sitting there, staring at a $3,200 inquiry for a household emergency loan, and feeling my heart sink deeper than I thought possible. They weren't even ashamed. They weren't afraid. They didn't care who got hurt, as long as they got what they wanted. I called the lender immediately, my voice shaking. I didn't apply for anything, I said. The woman on the phone hesitated. Ma'am, we have your signature. My stomach twisted. I asked them to send me a copy. When the email came through, my hands trembled so hard I almost dropped my phone. It was my signature. Perfectly forged. Identical strokes. Identical slant. As if I had signed it myself. But I hadn't. I stared at the document for a long time, my breath coming in short bursts. They were getting better. More careful. More bold. For the first time since I left Minnesota, fear crept under my skin. I froze when I saw the final line in the document. Emergency contact, Patricia Coleman reference, Marcus Coleman. They were still pretending to be my family. Still using my identity as if it belonged to them. still acting like I didn't deserve ownership of my own life. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the moon hang low over the mountains, and tried to steady my breath. At 3 a.m., I realized something important. Running wasn't enough. Hiding wasn't enough. Starting over wasn't enough. They weren't going to stop. Not on their own. Not out of guilt. Not out of love. If I didn't take control, they would ruin everything I had built. Everything I was building. Everything I hoped to become. So the next morning, I walked into the small sheriff's station in Silver Ridge, feeling both terrified and determined. I expected shock or disbelief when I explained what happened. I didn't expect the deputy to nod calmly, as if this story was more common than I realized. Identity abuse by family happens more than people think, he said. But you're doing the right thing by reporting it early. He guided me through filing a report, placing fraud alerts, and securing every financial and legal detail tied to my name. It felt strange, speaking about my own mother and brother as if they were strangers committing crimes. But that's exactly what they had become. During the process, he asked, "Do you have any reason to believe they'll keep doing it?" I almost laughed. Reason? I had 2 decades of reasons. Yes, I said quietly. They won't stop until there's nothing left of me. He nodded, typed a few more notes and said, "Then we'll make sure they can't reach you anymore." For the first time, I felt a flicker of protection. Real protection. Something I had never received from the people who were supposed to love me. But even that moment of relief didn't last long. Because betrayal never ends instantly. It fades slowly, painfully. And sometimes, right when you think you're safe, it strikes in a way you never expect. And for me, that moment was coming soon. Closer than I knew. For a few weeks, I tried to convince myself things were finally calming down. My fraud alerts were active. My accounts were locked tight. The sheriff's department had filed my report. And my new life in Silver Ridge finally started to feel steady. I went to work. I learned the rhythm of the quiet desert town. I found a small coffee shop where the barista already knew my order. Sometimes, I even caught myself smiling at how peaceful everything felt. But peace is fragile. And mine shattered the moment my phone rang one Thursday afternoon. It was an unfamiliar number, Nevada area code, so I answered, thinking it might be a client or someone from work. "Is this Ms. Nia Coleman?" A woman asked, her tone too formal, too careful. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Officer Ramirez from the Silver Ridge County Records Division. I'm calling regarding a new legal inquiry connected to your identity." I felt the blood drain from my face. What kind of inquiry? There was a pause, the kind that tells you something is terribly wrong. According to our system, someone attempted to file a temporary guardianship petition using your name. I stopped breathing. Guardianship? Of who? Of your mother, Patricia Coleman. Another pause. And your brother Marcus is listed as the supporting sponsor. My grip on the phone tightened so hard it hurt. Guardianship. That meant one thing. They were trying to claim that I was legally responsible for them. Financially. Medically. Permanently. If that petition had gone through, I wouldn't just be a name they used. I would be legally obligated to cover their debts, their emergencies, even their lifestyle. They would have full legal grounds to drain me dry. I swallowed hard. "I didn't file anything," I whispered. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't authorize any of this." Officer Ramirez took a soft breath, the kind people take before delivering news they wish they didn't have to share. "We suspected that, which is why we're calling you directly. But Miss Coleman." Her voice dropped to a lower, more urgent tone. "We need you to come to the courthouse immediately. Whoever filed this, They submitted paperwork with your forged signature. And it appears they intend to follow through. I felt dizzy. My own family, my own blood, had escalated to something this extreme. Not just loans. Not inquiries. Not small fraud. They wanted full control of my identity. My finances. My life. I don't even remember driving to the courthouse. I just remember the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the way the beige walls seemed to close in around me, the way my hands trembled as I handed over my ID and filled out emergency revocation forms. When they showed me the guardianship petition, my heart staggered. There it was again, my signature. Perfectly forged. So convincing it could fool anyone who didn't know better. And written in the section titled Reason for Petition, in Marcus's unmistakably sloppy handwriting. Our sister agreed to support our mother permanently due to her stable income. We need legal authorization to manage shared family resources. I couldn't believe it. After everything they had already taken from me, everything they had already destroyed, they wanted more. No, they wanted everything. By the time the paperwork was officially blocked, I felt hollow inside, drained, defeated, terrified of what they might try next. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was obsession, control, desperation. When I returned home that evening, the quiet felt different. Not peaceful. Not comforting. It felt like something was watching me. Something closing in. And then, just as I locked my door and leaned back against it trying to breathe, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. It was from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. Just a single sentence. You can run all you want, Nia, but you will always be family. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. Because the email wasn't signed by Marcus or Layla. It was signed by my mother. Patricia had found me. And she wasn't finished. I stared at that email for a long time. That single sentence. Those 13 words. It felt like someone had pressed an icy hand against my spine. You will always be family. Coming from anyone else, it might have sounded comforting. Coming from Patricia, it felt like a warning. I locked the door. Then I locked it again. My apartment, which had once felt like a safe new beginning, suddenly felt too small, too exposed, too reachable. I turned off all the lights and stood in the dark, listening for any sound outside my window, any footsteps in the hallway. It took almost an hour before the shaking in my hands finally settled. But the fear stayed. It lingered under my skin, whispering that my past wasn't finished with me yet. The next morning, I walked into the sheriff's station for the second time in a month. I explained everything, the email, the forged guardianship, the new attempts to access my identity. Officer Ramirez listened quietly, her brows pulling together in concern. This is more organized than a typical family dispute, she said. It looks like they have a pattern. And if they've been successful before, they won't stop trying. She leaned forward. You need legal protection now, not just financial security. She was right. I was no longer dealing with emotional manipulation. This was targeted, persistent fraud led by people who knew my personal history and weaknesses better than anyone else. She connected me with a victims advocacy attorney who specialized in identity abuse by family members. Something I didn't even know existed until that moment. When I met attorney Monica Hayes later that week, she looked at my documents, my forged signatures, the guardianship attempt, the fraudulent loan applications. And she didn't look surprised at all. Your family is escalating because you left, she said calmly. You changed the power dynamic. Now they're trying to force it back. A bitter laugh escaped me. By stealing my life? By taking whatever they believe they're entitled to. She paused. And some families believe they're entitled to everything. She helped me file a full identity protection petition, documented every incident, and created a financial barrier so heavy that even attempting to open something in my name would trigger police alerts. For the first time, I felt like I had someone in my corner. But the feeling didn't last. Because trauma doesn't leave your body overnight. It grows roots. Every unknown number made my pulse jump. Every email notification made my stomach twist. Every knock on the door froze me in place. The worst part? I started blaming myself. Maybe I should have helped them more. Maybe I should have said yes sooner. Maybe leaving was the wrong choice. Maybe I was exaggerating the danger. This is how family manipulation works. It rewrites the truth so quietly you don't even notice. The panic attacks started 2 weeks later. Small at first, a tight chest, trembling fingers, a feeling like I couldn't breathe fast enough. But they grew worse. One night, I collapsed on my living room floor, gasping, convinced I was dying. I pressed my hand against my chest, but the more I tried to breathe, the worse it felt. When it finally passed, I sat there on the cold tiles, tears streaming silently down my face, realizing something I had ignored for too long. I was living in constant fear. Fear of the people who were supposed to love me. Fear of the past catching up. Fear of being dragged back into a life that had nearly destroyed me. The next morning, I made another decision. One I should have made long before. I booked an appointment with a therapist. That's how I met Dr. Naomi Clark, the woman who would change everything. I walked into her office for the first time with my shoulders tense, my heartbeat loud in my ears, my breath shallow. She had warm brown eyes, a gentle voice, and the kind of presence that made you feel seen without judgment. "What brings you here today?" she asked softly. And for the first time in my life, I told the truth. Not the softened version. Not the excuses. Not the lies I told myself to survive. I told her everything. The identity theft. The guardianship attempt. The forged signatures. The email. The running. The fear. The panic attacks. The years of emotional debt I had carried for a family who never carried me. She listened without interrupting. Without flinching. Without doubting me. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly. "Nia," she said gently, "you're not running from your family anymore. You're healing from them." Something inside me cracked open, but this time, it wasn't pain. It was relief. Therapy didn't fix everything overnight, but it gave me something I had lost a long time ago. Myself. My voice. My worth. Little by little, the fear loosened its grip. Little by little, I began to breathe again. Little by little, I began to believe. Maybe I deserved a life that wasn't built on sacrifice. Maybe I deserved peace. Maybe I deserved love, the real kind, not the kind my family used as leverage. But while I was healing, my mother, brother, and sister-in-law were planning their next move. A move far more dangerous than anything before. And this time, it wouldn't just threaten my identity. It would threaten my freedom. Healing gives you clarity. But clarity also makes you see danger sooner. By the time winter settled over Silver Ridge, I was finally starting to feel steady again. Therapy was helping me untangle years of manipulation. My legal protections were in place. I had a routine: work, gym, journal, sleep, a rhythm that felt almost healthy. But trauma has a strange way of warning you before the storm hits. For days, I felt on edge for no obvious reason. Every sound in the hallway made me turn my head. Every shadow outside my window made my stomach twist. Dr. Clark told me it might be a trauma response, but deep down, I knew it was something else. Something was coming. And I was right. It happened on a cold Friday evening. I had just returned from therapy, kicked off my shoes, made tea, and curled up on the couch with a blanket. I was watching some mindless show, trying to let the day settle, when suddenly, bang, 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 a loud knock at the door. My heart stopped. No one knocks at my door. Not without calling first. Not in this quiet building. For a moment, I just sat there frozen, gripping my mug so tightly my fingers hurt. Another knock came, heavier this time. "Miss Coleman." A deep voice called. "Silver Ridge Sheriff's Office. We need you to open the door." My chest tightened. I forced myself to stand and walked slowly toward the door, every step heavy with dread. When I opened it, 2 uniformed officers were standing there. The older one gave me a clipped nod. "Are you Nia Coleman?" "Yes," I whispered. "Is something wrong?" His expression didn't soften. "Ma'am, we received a report connected to you." My breath caught. A report? About what? The younger officer shifted uncomfortably before saying the words that made my blood run cold. "You've been reported for financial exploitation of your elderly mother." I felt the world tilt sideways. "What?" My voice barely came out. I don't understand. I haven't spoken to her in months." The older officer raised a paper. "Ma'am, we have a sworn statement claiming that you drained your mother's accounts, abandoned her medical needs, and left her at risk." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother, the same woman who forged my signature, tried to trap me in debt, tried to force guardianship on me, was now accusing me of exploiting her? It was surreal, wild, cruel. But worst of all, it was strategic. False elder abuse claims are taken very seriously. Most cases end with charges, investigations, sometimes even arrests. They knew exactly what they were doing. My voice shook as I forced the words out. "That's a lie. I haven't taken a single dollar from her. She's the one who—" The older officer lifted a hand. "Ma'am, we're not here to arrest you. But we need you to come down to the station for questioning." I felt my throat close. It wasn't the questioning that scared me, it was the realization that my family had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. They weren't just trying to use me. They weren't just trying to drain me. They weren't even trying to control me anymore. They were trying to criminalize me. Destroy my record. Destroy my name. Destroy any chance of the peaceful life I was fighting so hard for. Inside the station, I spent hours explaining everything: the fraud, the forged loans, the guardianship attempt, the email, the legal filings. When I showed them the paperwork and my attorney's reports, their skeptical expressions changed to something like concern and embarrassment. By the time they compared Patricia's new statement to my documented case, the false report began to fall apart quickly. And then the final piece came. The officer in charge returned and said quietly, "Miss Coleman, your mother has filed 3 other contradictory statements in the past 2 months. Each one is inconsistent with the last." Another officer added, "It appears she has a pattern of retaliation. We will amend this as a false report." The relief was so sudden it almost knocked me off balance. When I finally stepped out into the cold night air, I felt the ache of exhaustion deep in my bones. I leaned against my car, closed my eyes, and let the cold breeze hit my face. They had tried to get me arrested. My own mother had tried to label me a criminal. All because I left. All because I refused to be their puppet. That night I cried in my car, not because I was weak, but because I finally understood something I had been avoiding. This wasn't family. This was a war. And surviving it meant letting go of any hope that they might ever change. When I got home, there was a message waiting on my phone. Unknown number. Just 5 words. "This isn't over, Nia." But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because I knew something they didn't know. I wasn't alone anymore. I had therapy. I had legal protection. I had myself. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight back. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, but also with a strange clarity I hadn't felt in years. Fear was still there, a familiar shadow, but something stronger had grown beside it. Resolve. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. I started the day by calling Attorney Hayes. She picked up on the second ring, her voice steady and warm in a way that made me exhale for the first time since the false police report. "I figured I might hear from you today," she said. "How bad was it?" I told her everything: the officers at my door, the accusation, the scare, the late-night message. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she took a slow breath. "Nia, they are escalating because they realize they've lost control over you. People who depend on manipulation panic when the manipulation stops working." I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. "So what do I do now?" "This time," she said firmly, "you don't defend yourself. You go on offense." Those words stayed with me all day, simple, sharp, correct. For years, my family had thrived on my silence, my fear, my hesitation, my guilt. They counted on me never fighting back because they knew I hated conflict. They knew I avoided confrontation. They knew I had a soft heart. But they had mistaken kindness for weakness. And that mistake was about to cost them. Attorney Hayes moved fast, faster than I expected. Within hours, she filed for a cease and desist order, a protective injunction, a formal fraud investigation request, a financial exploitation counter-report, and a petition to flag all future attempts made in my name. Her confidence made me feel powerful by association. For the first time in my life, someone stood between me and the people who had always hurt me. That afternoon, therapy felt different too. I sat in Dr. Clark's office, knees pulled close, hands wrapped around a warm mug of chamomile tea. She listened as I explained what had happened the night before. The knock, the accusation, the message. She leaned forward slightly, her expression gentle. "Tell me," she said, "what did you feel in that moment, after it all happened, when you finally sat alone in your car?" I had to think. Not about the fear, that was obvious. Not about the anger, that came later. Something deeper. I hesitated. Tired. She nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting for that exact word. Tired is what happens when you've spent your whole life giving people access to your heart, your time, your resources, your energy, and never once giving yourself permission to protect your own peace. She paused, letting the silence settle into the space between us. "You are not tired because you are weak, Nia. You are tired because you have been strong alone for far too long." The words hit something inside me. Not pain. Not grief. Recognition. For the first time, I saw my story clearly. Not as a series of betrayals, not as a collection of wounds, but as a long pattern of surviving things I should never have been forced to survive. I walked out of therapy with my shoulders straighter, my breath steadier, my heart a little lighter. That evening, I sat at my small kitchen table in my Silver Ridge apartment and opened my journal. The pages were empty, untouched, waiting. I picked up my pen and wrote the first sentence that came to mind. "I am done apologizing for saving myself." A moment later, I wrote another. "I am allowed to leave the people who harm me." And then, family is not an excuse for abuse. By the time I closed my journal, something had shifted inside me, something I didn't have words for yet, but I could feel it like warmth spreading through my chest. Strength. Not loud strength. Not angry strength. Quiet, steady, unshakable strength. That night, I slept better than I had in months. But the universe has a way of testing you the moment you find your footing. Because the next morning, a letter arrived that changed everything again. Not from my family. Not from the sheriff. Not from a lender. It was from a government office across state lines. And what was written inside would become the turning point of my entire story. The envelope was thin, plain, unmarked except for a government seal in the corner, one I didn't recognize at first glance. For a moment, I just stood there in the hallway staring at it, feeling that old familiar tension return to my chest. After everything that had happened, even opening mail felt dangerous. I carried it inside, sat at my kitchen table, and slid my finger under the flap. What I pulled out was a single-page notice. A notice that made my entire body go cold. This letter is regarding an open investigation into the guardianship petition filed in your name by Patricia Coleman of Ramsey County, Minnesota. I felt my vision blur for a second. There was more. We have reason to believe this petition may involve forged medical records, falsified statements, and fraudulent identity claims. You are listed as the involuntary guardian nominee. They had tried again. Not once. Not twice. But multiple times. Even after moving states. Even after legal warnings. Even after being caught. They were trying to trap me legally, permanently, by manipulating the system in ways that could take years to undo. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so badly the paper fluttered like a dying bird. But then, beneath the panic, something else stirred. A fire. A sharp, quiet fire I had never felt before. I picked up the phone and called Attorney Hayes immediately. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was calm, far calmer than mine. "Read it to me," she said. I did. Every word. By the time I finished, she let out a slow, controlled exhale. "Nia, this isn't just fraud anymore. What they're doing crosses into interstate crime. This is bigger than local enforcement now." I rubbed my forehead, trying to steady my breath. "What do we do?" Her answer came without hesitation. "We fight back harder. We escalate. We get ahead of them before they corner you." Within hours, she filed a federal identity theft affidavit, a multi-state fraud protection petition, a request for a protective order that spans state lines, a notification to the Attorney General's office. For the first time, the law was finally shifting in my direction. But the moment that truly changed everything happened the next day, during my therapy session. I walked into Dr. Clark's office with the letter still in my bag. I didn't even wait to sit down before saying, "They're not going to stop, are they?" She looked at me carefully, slowly. Then she said something that felt like a key turning inside a locked door. "They might not stop, Nia. But you can stop letting them define your life." I sat down, her words sinking deeper than anything I had heard in months. "You have already survived more than what breaks most people," she continued. "And not once did you lose your compassion, your integrity, or your sense of self. That alone tells me something important." She paused before speaking the words that healed a part of me I didn't realize was still hurting. "You are not a victim anymore. You're a survivor choosing your future." For the first time in my life, I believed her. I really did. When the session ended, I walked outside and stood in the cool Nevada air, feeling something I couldn't name at first. A quiet strength curling through my chest, a certainty that I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I was ready for whatever came next. That evening, as the sun fell behind the red mountains and painted the sky gold and violet, I sat at my kitchen table and did something symbolic. Something small but powerful. I took a fresh page in my journal and wrote, "I choose myself." Underneath it, I added, "And I'm not going back." It felt like reclaiming my life with ink and paper. Later that night, my phone buzzed loudly on the counter. For a moment my heart jumped. Old instinct. But when I looked at the screen, a slow, unexpected smile spread across my face. It wasn't my family. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a lender. It was an email from the Attorney General's office acknowledging my case, confirming the investigation was officially open, and that I was legally protected from any future guardianship or identity attempts. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Safety. True safety. Not the kind that depends on someone else. Not the kind that disappears when people change their minds. A safety that came from me. From my choices. My strength. My courage to finally break the cycle. I curled up on the couch that night, wrapped in a soft blanket, watching the lights of Silver Ridge shimmer through my window. And for the first time since childhood, I felt free. Not because the battle was over, but because I wasn't powerless anymore. This was my turning point. My reclaiming. My beginning. And no matter what my family tried next, they would never own my life again.